Welcome everyone to Flip Learning 3.0. This session is number 7 in a series about the new era of Flip Learning. We thank you all for being with us today and want to remind you that this is a 30-minute session. Today's topic, how Flip Learning takes gamification of your classroom from good to great. We are blessed to have with us today Tom Driscoll. Tom is an educator, director of educational technology, a writer, a speaker, a consultant, and a parent committed to improving schools through innovative approaches to teaching, learning, and leadership. He has authored chapters for several books on instructional technology, including Flip Learning, the Gateway to Student Engagement. Your moderator today, as usual, will be Jon Bergmann, or JB as we call him, and the presentation will take about 15 minutes, after which we'll take your questions. To pose a question, you'll need to click the Q&A button in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, then type your question into the text box. I will read your questions out loud and direct them to our panelists for a reply. I think that covers it, so with that, let's get started. JB, over to you.
Awesome being with you guys back the Flip 3.0 webinar series. Thank the Flip Learning certified mission partners. There's some amazing companies. We encourage you to check them out. They're doing awesome work. Particularly, we want to reach out to Cisco, who is providing the platform that you are watching this on. Cisco is amazing. So with that said, as we've been talking about Flip Learning 3.0, as you know, there are 5 factors. Flip Learning is not static. It's evolving because of 3 factors. It's emerging as a global movement. There's a new awareness, and it's created new opportunities. Today, we're going to focus on Flip Learning is evolving because of 3 factors, and specifically those 3 factors, if you remember, is research, classroom innovation, and technology. We're going to focus on classroom innovation and the particular idea of gamification. And that's why we asked the expert, the guru of gamification and Flip to be with us, the amazing, the awesome, the great Tom Driscoll, who knows so much about gamification. In fact, let me show you something that we realized when we were putting this out. We were calling it game-based learning, but Tom's going to inform us that there's a whole big difference between game-based and gamification. We're going to talk about gamification. So if you want to talk about game-based learning, wrong webinar. So, Tom, take it over. Love to hear the stuff you've got to share.
All right, thanks so much, John. So I use a classroom teacher, a high school social studies teacher. I gamify my class. But before that, I moved towards the Flip Learning model. Worked a lot with John in the past. I just truly appreciate all the work that he's done for the past years and the support he's given me. So just on the screen, just a quick overview, just my role. I'm a director of educational technology for a regional district in Rhode Island. I'm also an instructor, the tech teacher. And my contact information there is tomdriscoll3.com, my email, and then my Twitter handle. Definitely reach out at any point if you want some help on any of the things that we cover today in the webinar. All right, so the guiding question that we'll explore is, how can Flip Learning help us tap into the motivational power of games to increase engagement and enhance learning experiences? And before we dive in, we're actually going to pose a question to you guys. So John, do you want to throw the Mindy Meter up?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so here's the question, folks. We want to say, what do you see are the benefits of gamification for learning? So if you take out your device, go to a different tab, whatever, go to minty.com, type in the code 35748. And then you can respond to the question yourself. What do you see are the benefits? This is a word cloud, so yeah, dive in. Let's see what you guys think. Take a second, yeah. Let me check if it works. There we go. Learning, engagement, motivation, achievement, fun, feedback, motivation, rewards. Yeah. Desire. Ooh, cool word. Whoever did that. Excellent. Yeah. Some more stuff coming in. Well, the key word there seems, Tom, engagement. You know, Tom, as we're watching this come in, I ask you a question. I mean, games seem frilly to a lot of teachers. They think, you know, the idea of games is, it's not real education, Tom. That's what I think. I've heard that said.
Yeah, game is a four-letter word for a lot of teachers, right? Like they think that, you know, if they're playing a game, well, a lot of times it's because it's associated with something that's simply non-educational, which I completely understand because a lot of times they're not. But people like playing games for a reason. You know, we'll get into that in a second, but what's perfect about the result of this word cloud here is a lot of the participants are hitting upon the whole concept of games are motivating, they're engaging, and it's because they're designed that way. So what we'll talk about a little bit in our webinar is if that's the case, and if a lot of us as classroom teachers, I know I struggle with this a bit, is a lack of engagement at times, then why not leverage the power of games and game mechanics and apply them to teaching to ramp up the engagement in our classroom? So that's great results from that.
So let's dive in. What is gamification? So if there's game-based learning, what is gamification? Yeah, give it to us.
Yeah, so the way that most of my research comes back to this idea that gamification is using game mechanics to promote some type of desired behavior, and in school it just depends on what your target is, and mostly it's just about improving academic achievement and enhancing instruction. So this research came out of Teachers College, and a lot of his work was saying, all right, gamification, how do we harness the motivational power of games and apply it to a real-world problem? And in his research, the real-world problem was, you know, either lack of student achievement or lack of engagement. So how do we couple those two? So take the best of what games can offer and how they're designed, apply that to address issues that we see in the classroom.
Cool, cool. So gamification versus game-based, they're different ball games. So what's the deal?
They are, and both have value in education. Right, so I'm not saying that gamification is better than game-based learning. They're just different things. So for instance, game-based learning is you're using an actual game, whether it's designed for education or not, to teach something. So it integrates the games into the learning process. Two examples I put there are, so for instance, Minecraft. A lot of people use Minecraft to teach certain skills, have kids immersed in that game to teach something.
That's been around for a long time, Tom. I mean, we played Oregon Trail, or well, I didn't because I was pre that. But Oregon Trail, when I first started teaching back in the dark ages, was like a game that we used to teach kids stuff.
Exactly. It's been around for a while, but a lot of games were really poorly designed for education. So like it would be like, all right, do a math problem, shoot a zombie, right? But there was no connection between, right, what you were doing in the game versus the academic content. So good games, like for instance, I have the one up there from iCivics, that's a screenshot. That's created by the Sandra Day O'Connor Foundation, but those are games that are designed to teach people civic values and understanding, so those are great. But that's game-based learning, so what we're going to talk about is not necessarily using a game in your class, but designing your class as if it were a game.
So you're talking about making the class a game, right, as opposed to using a game in the class.
Exactly. So, and even if you don't go all in with it, there's different strategies that you can use from the gaming world or from the gaming industry that can improve parts of your class.
Now, you got to gamification through Flipped. I know other people are gamifying their classroom without Flip, but can you briefly share us how your kind of journey?
Yeah, so when I first started to flip my class, and I was just doing some research, and I reached out to you directly so many years ago, and I started to flip my class, started to archive my direct instruction, and that just gave me the ability to innovate in the classroom. You know, it just gave me, I was just tinkering with different concepts. And once I had some of my content archived, and I moved more towards a mastery system, what happened was I started to research gamification. I saw the overlap. I was like, wow, so many of the things that make a flipped mastery classroom, or just a flipped classroom in general, valuable and innovative, line up perfectly with how you could gamify your classroom. And I'll go through some of the examples later, but that was my progression. Is I flipped my class, then I tinkered with the mastery concept, then I said, wow, now that I'm in a mastery progression anyway, how could I layer in game elements and gamify the class in ways that I couldn't have if I was still teaching in a traditional
I'm seeing this as a huge trend across the world. I just got back from FlipCon New Zealand, and at FlipCon New Zealand, that was a big topic, was gamification in the flipped classroom model. And so many people had walked this same journey that you did and are on the same journey that you did. So key elements of gamification, tell us about this.
Yeah, so there are some main things that make something what you would call gamified. And the first thing is that in a game, you have immediate feedback and reinforcement. So you don't have to wait. There's no lag time. And just think about good teaching. The shorter that feedback loop can be, the better. So this is inherently better for teaching, that immediate feedback. Progress tracking and mastery. Kids are motivated, people are motivated by knowing exactly how well they're doing in real time, whether it's against some type of leaderboard or just showing progression in a classroom. The third is increasing levels of difficulty and a leveling system. So most games have that built into them.
And you know what strikes me about this, Tom, is that this is just good teaching. I mean, in fact, it's the research. I've been reading a lot of research lately. This follows research in education, immediate feedback particularly. So, but there's three more you want to talk about.
Yeah, so there's three more. The low risk of failure, you know, the idea that, you know, if even the old school games like Mario falls into the pit, it's not like you can't play anymore. He just reappears on the top of the pit, right? So there's low risk. You just keep trying and trying until you get it. There's choice, and especially with a lot of the new games that have different story arcs and narratives, you can choose your own adventure type thing, so that's part of it. And then storyline and narrative, so that's the tougher part I'll get back to later, but think about all of those other ones that we mentioned as elements of gamification. If you took gamification off the title of these slides, you're right, that would just be elements of good teaching.
Yeah. Although low risk of failure, unfortunately, too many schools have high risks of failures. And so this, but still, you're right, it's still good teaching. Yeah. So benefits, why should somebody consider it? You got some things to share?
Yeah, so the two that, I'm so glad that word cloud came out how it did, because look at the two things I highlighted.
There you go.
Motivation and engagement, those are the two biggest words that came up, right? The second thing is the idea that, you know, in this way that you design your classes, when you gamify it, it really encourages students to fix their mistakes and master something before moving on. And there's that acronym a lot of people see, the fail first attempt in learning. It really reinforces that, because when kids think about a game or those types of things, they know that you don't move on in a game until you master it. So really reinforcing that in the classroom is helpful. And then lastly, that shifting towards the student-centered environment is a big part of it. It helps Ken take more responsibility over it, to own it. And I saw that tremendously once I did this.
This is what Flipped is all about, folks. I mean, as I walk into Flipped classrooms, more advocacy for kids, they're more engaged, but you add the gamification piece and it kind of just levels it up a little bit. Oh, got that.
There you go. Yeah.
There you go.
So here are the mechanics that I layered into my class. You could do all of these. I mean, it's however you'd want to set it up, but these are the 7 that I'll walk through in a second, how I did it specifically in my class. But it's the terminology, which a lot of it I had to learn myself. Like, I'm not a big gamer, so I actually asked my kids, what do these things even mean in your games? And I tried to layer in some of the terms. A leveling system, I had a badges and achievements. I actually changed my grading system to points through attrition or an XP style. So instead of averaging, you constantly accumulate more points as you do more activities in the class. And just that alone was actually empowering to some kids, because their grade never technically goes down in that type of system. They're always learning more, and that XP reflects that they learned more, which was a tougher shift for some of the kids, but it was very helpful. Then there's the concept of leaderboards, having collaborative team missions, and then lastly, having a narrative and avatars in our.
Awesome. So a bunch of words here. So you're saying it's going to take some time to learn the words, right? Because a lot of us aren't gamers. You know, I don't play a lot of video games. It's not my thing.
Yeah, so that's where you just kind of lean on your kids. You know, ask them, get some help. You know, kids are going to be really eager to help out with something like this. So what I did is I took, say, more of the traditional academic words, like a unit, objective, average, groups, classes, and then I just literally just changed the terminology of them. And even though it seems small, it actually did have an impact on it. Some kids were like, all right, guys, we're going to engage in a new mission on Monday. It was better than say, hey, guess what? Unit 3, objective 2.2, right?
Nice.
Even if it was
terminology matters.
Yeah, it was the same. Like, I hate to say it, but just repackaging it for the kids sometimes can really make it more engaging for them. And then in terms that they understand, because they may not understand necessarily, you know, Common Core Performance Standard 10.3.2, like that just doesn't register with them as well as, hey, we're going to set up your guilds, and we're going to have a mission, and we're going to accomplish this. Like, they get that. So having that connection with the kids definitely helps.
Awesome. So leveling, how's the leveling work?
Yep, so the leveling system is I basically broke out my units into, you know, kind of core objectives and standards, and you did backward design, you know, just kind of what good teaching is. And then I created different levels, and I made the mistake at the beginning of making the levels too big. Like, it took like a week to get through a level at the beginning, and they said, no, Mr. Driscoll, that's not how games work necessarily. Usually there's a quicker progression. So then I made it so that you could maybe get through a level or maybe even 2 in one day. depending on how well you progress, because just that idea of going from level 1 to 10 in a week is more engaging and empowering than saying, hey, I only got through one level in 2 weeks. Even if it's the same amount of content, just repackage it. Exactly.
Yeah. All right. So badges, people dig badges, right? Kids?
They did, and I had the kids help design them. Actually, all the badges that we made, those are just some of the examples, and some of the kids took certain clip art, but we just made it in Google Drawings, created it into an image, and then we created a like achievements that some of them was just kind of old school traditional. We would put them up on a bulletin board and print out with the kids' names, but you could have digital versions of it. There's platforms for it, but they did just like getting recognition, and not just for the highest score. Like, yes, we had that, but we created different ones for kids that demonstrated better, different attributes throughout the game, and gave those out. The kids really liked that concept. Now, this was the thing that I didn't think at first would make a big deal, but it actually did, was that when I moved towards the XP system and had it kind of build up, for whatever reason, it actually did work better with the kids, where as they accrued XP throughout the unit, that's how they got their...
So like they all started with an F, right? They all had 0 points, and when you get to 800 points, you get an A.
Exactly.
XP,
right?
not points. XP.
But the thing is, since the way I designed it was unlimited retakes and you can master it, like there was no reason that, like, say they got a C or whatever on something before that averages with the A, that didn't happen anymore, because they would just keep building up until they got to that. So I said, look, if you master everything in this, I would call it a unit before, but anything in this mission or this level, and you get up to that XP, then you get that letter grade. So I would have to, because the school that I was in, we had a different traditional grading system, so I still have to convert it over, but the kids definitely like this different concept of grading.
And this must be how you kept track of them, right? This is your spreadsheet for the kids, right? You blurred out kiddos' names, right?
Yep. So I didn't use any special product or platform. This is literally a Google spreadsheet.
Nice.
And I'm not as much of a spreadsheet guru as other people, so I actually leaned on a few people to help me out with the setting this up. Actually, the big one is Mindy Meter, who I'll reference his book at the end. But basically, I would just go around with either my Chromebook, or I had an iPad at the time, and I would plug in their XP in the columns, and it would just it would calculate it. The kids would see it. There would be a leaderboard. It would just average it, and it was really helpful to show the kids.
Yeah, you gotta keep track somehow. Oh, leaderboards. Does that make kids feel bad? When some kids were better than others, higher XP, right?
So the leaderboard, I would only make visible like the top 5. Okay. Right. So like, how can you crack that top 5? Because you're right, like if I had a class of 30 and like Johnny's 28, like, that's not, you don't really want to make that visible all the time, but I would, the goal would be to get into that top group, or sometimes I would only make visible the groups, because then it's a little bit less of a stigma. So there was also a competition, so to speak, for groups. So like my guild or my group, whatever, my group, it was competing for total XP of the classes or whatever. Exactly. So it would actually calculate everybody's XP in the class, and then, there would be a formula. But then we would do class against class. Like I taught 3 different world history sections of the same subject, so all the classes would compete in a separate competition as well during each level. Cool. Missions? Talk about the missions. Yeah. So we would have team missions. So as they progressed through the levels, a lot of times they weren't allowed to do it individually. They would actually have to do it together. And then we'll talk about avatars a little bit later, but depending on what avatar type they did, it would be a different type of history they would research. So for instance, if they chose like the military avatar or the general, they would look up, say, they would do part of that mission, which was, look up the key military battles of ancient Rome. Where if somebody was more of a, arts and culture avatar, they would do that part, but when they created their team missions, they all had different things that they would do for that mission. And then they would get a group score for that before they moved on. But that's something that, and this is kind of a bigger thing with mastery learning, is how do you still keep that social aspect of learning? How are they learning together and not just completely going off individually on their own? And this helped me kind of bring them back and have them work together. And then this last part was, full disclosure, it was the toughest to sell at the beginning. But this came out of the work from Lee Sheldon at RPI, which I'll reference his book later. But it's really powerful. You can actually make a narrative arc to your class, or like a storyline, like a backstory to the game. So what I did is I created this concept called the blueprint, where like the class had this, this narrative that we were part of this group that was recruited to study ancient civilizations to rebuild our own after some apocalyptic event or something. So some of the kids really bought into this, so that there was actually a purpose throughout the year of each mission that it was connected to the storyline. Some kids who weren't necessarily gamers were like, but for them, I was like, well, we're doing this either way, so whether you buy into the storyline, it's up to you. But
but I think that there's a purpose. There's kind of an overarching story. Yeah, that works for me.
Yep.
Yeah, awesome. So avatars, you had different classes, it looks like?
Yeah, so the avatar classes I mentioned, like, depending on which one you were. So if you were the judge, maybe you looked up like the legal system of that particular civilization we were studying, and I kind of mentioned it before, but they got to pick, each quarter they would pick a different avatar class, so that when they did the team missions, they would study a different type of
Did they have to switch?
I encouraged them to, just so like if you're the general quarter one, I didn't want them just doing military history all year. I wanted them to do a little bit different.
Okay, good. All right, good.
Give them some power. So then the mission guides, this is just how they would see, what's coming up, and then also for me to help connect it to our curriculum, because, there were key, objectives and standards and skills that I wanted them to learn. So I tried to connect them so that they could see, all right, yes, we're doing this mission or this part of the game, but you're also learning, say, like, how to take and defend a position and connecting it that way.
So you had to get organized, right?
Yeah, so this helped organize it. So actually, John, this should look kind of familiar to you, right?
It does, actually, yeah.
So when I first started to look at, mastery learning, I looked at a lot of John's early work on flipped mastery, and that's how I started to create my unit guide. So this is what it looked like before, where I'd have my objectives, I'd number them out in the learning test, but this is the after.
Sorry, look at that. The boring sheet that I showed, that's the old Jon Bergmann test. You got missions and tasks, but it's really the same thing.
Same concept, but you can see how I changed the terminology. I chunked it a little bit better. I made it so it wouldn't take as long, and then I put available XP, how much they could learn up to. And then in that sheet was actually links to all of the resources that they would need. And to get back to the flipping, like see, for instance, the instructional videos, those are the links to the instructional videos that I had made before when I flipped my class the first time. Now I'm just linking them as a resource as they go through.
And they get 10 XP.
And yes, for doing the guided viewing notes or the quiz through, they would build up their XP as they go through that content.
Makes sense, yeah.
And then mission progress, this was just my way of keeping track. So when they came in the room, actually the little picture to the left is we had our smart board. The kids would just drag their name to the column of level of help they might need. So like if they needed me to right away at the beginning of class to help them out, they would put it in the first column. But one thing I realized is I actually changed the colors after this because there was a stigma with the red column, right? So they didn't want to put their name in the red. So something as simple as that, I just changing that to make it look more like, hey, it's a good thing sometimes if you're asking for help right away. So, but it's just a way for them to track their progress. And then this slide, they're setting their goals for the day, reflecting on their effort, their progress through the.
So they're picking what they're going to do because there's that self-direction. They've got this.
Exactly.
They got the mission they've got to do, but there's parts to do it, and they know what they're doing. Got it.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah, we're running out of time, so I want to make sure we get some time for some questions from people. So.
Yeah, so super quick. The results were like the engagement was just through the roof with most of the kids. In the group missions, there was like the whole idea of the positive peer pressure to get kids to participate and to work together. I got to be more innovative with my assessments, giving them different ways to demonstrate mastery, new ways to leverage technology, and then lastly, get kids to actually collaborate and help each other more.
The big picture, it was a win. Kids are engaged. They enjoyed the class. You enjoyed it.
I did, yes.
Yeah, it just transformed your class. This is awesome. This is awesome. So we're going to go back to Mindy Meter. So guys, pull out your device. And we got a second question for you. I'll pull it up here. How can flipped learning help you gamify your classroom? Just a short sentence or two, if you could just jump in. It's just your context. How do you think it can do for you? time to do it. Oh, so that's, I think you're saying I don't have the time to do it, Tom.
Yeah.
I mean, we really haven't gone into the details of the specifics.
Yeah.
I mean, you gave some quick ideas as they're chiming in. Let's just ask a couple questions that's just coming to my mind. I mean, how did you find the time to do it? I mean, that's...
Yeah, well, actually, I interpret that, and jump in the chat box, but I interpret that as like, as more as a positive, like, within your class, it gives you time to do this.
Oh, I see. Okay. Oh, yeah. All right. Yeah.
Because that's exactly what it was. Like, after I flipped my class and I had that ability to be more innovative with the class time I now had, because I freed up all the time, I'm not lecturing anymore, it did give me more time to experiment and do these things in my class.
Yeah. I see what you're saying. Good. Anybody else want to chime in before we move on back to the, we're kind of at the stage for the Q&A time here in just a minute. Yep. We're a little bit shy of time because Tom is amazing doing all this stuff. All right, I'm just going to switch back out. And yeah, tools to help gamify, Kahoot, Quizlet, ClassCraft. I keep hearing a lot about ClassCraft, guys.
Yes.
When I was in New Zealand, that was the talk of the town. I'm telling you, I don't know if that's the case.
I've worked with the guys over at ClassCraft a little bit, and they basically created a platform to do a lot of the things that I mentioned, but it's in their platform already, and it's kind of built up. So, yeah,
definitely check that out. Yeah,
definitely worth checking out.
And we're not endorsing them in a real sense, but I keep hearing that one. Here's some books. So
yeah,
right?
So just resources. If you want access to this slide deck, that bit.ly will get you there. If you want to get it, we'll send out the link to the webinar. I have a bunch of resources I curated on my website, tomdriscoll3.com/gamification. And then the two books that I found most helpful gamifying my class were Lee Sheldon, professor at RPI, The Multiplayer Classroom, and then Mike Matera created a book on how he gamified his class. And he's actually the guy that showed me how to make that spreadsheet I showed earlier in the webinar.
So I think it's time. Errol, I bet there's some questions in the Q&A.
Sounds right. Let's go after them. If you have a question, now is your time to ask. You can do that by going to the upper right-hand corner of your screen, clicking on the Q&A button, and typing in your question. Make sure that you direct your question to all panelists. So go there now. We'll take the first question. So, Tom, sounds like a lot of work. Where is the best place to start the process of gamifying my classes?
That's a great question. So for me, actually, what enabled me to even start this was to just have some type of resource bank of the content. So whether it was some of the videos that I created ahead of time, or resources that I curated, because that's going to enable you to open up the class for them to start doing this.
Are you saying, Tom, there that basically you could have never done this had you not flipped your classroom?
It would have been a lot tougher. Yeah, like
okay,
I don't think it would have happened, or at least not at the scale that I did, without having really made that shift towards flipped learning.
Yeah.
The other thing that I think would help out would be just gamify a lesson. You know, start there. Get input from your kids, have them help design it with you, especially with the terminology, because even since I did it with that unit, the terminology might have changed already because the gaming industry changes so quickly. So involve your kids in the design process. It would be my first tip.
Sounds very good. We have another question from Lee Almstead. Tom, did you gamify on the fly, or did you set the work and then jump in?
I wouldn't say I did it on the fly because, as you saw on that, I already had like the structure of the class setup, and then I added the game layers to it. But I definitely, like, I didn't have the whole year done when I started it in September, like as we did each unit, because I almost did that purposely because I knew I was going to iterate on it, and again, getting feedback from the kids and changing things up. So I would really go one unit at a time, and then shift it up from there.
Got it. Very good. Rebecca Flores says, Flip Learning is all about improving the activities in class. Curious as to how you come up with the story. She's a 6th grade math teacher.
Yes, so the backstory, I actually got a lot of inspiration from Lee Sheldon. He's the professor at RPI I mentioned, and he was very into the idea of, you know, games shouldn't just be about the mechanics of it, but having that storyline and that story arc was really powerful for a lot of people. And so I proposed a couple of different ideas at the beginning of the year, and we actually designed it together as a class during the first week or two. So I got a lot of input from the kids, and it just happened to be that kind of like the post-apocalyptic theme, a lot of the kids liked that idea, and it connected well with history and exploring.
You're a history teacher, Tom, so it feels a little easier to do story. But I'm
yeah,
thinking of this gal. She's a math teacher. Any thoughts? What's the epic storyline in 7th grade math?
Well, I'll give you an example of, you know, I know a science teacher who created a storyline that was more about like a zombie apocalypse type thing, and they had to do a lot of math and science to figure out how to, you know, how to cure the disease or things like that. I know a foreign language teacher, as I mentioned to John before, the storyline was that they're trapped in an airport in this country. They don't know any English, but they have to learn or know the other language, but they have to learn enough of the language to get themselves out of the airport, you know. So there are ways that you can get creative with just about any subject area. It's just, again, including your kids in it, I think sometimes helps because they may be more engaged in things than you know.
We move on. Victoria Miles would like to know, do you use AP along with XP? Is your entire grading system based on the XP points?
Okay, so I'm not sure exactly what AP is in reference to, but I did convert my grades over when I entered it into like our official grade book. So we didn't have a standard-based grading system, so I did have to take that XP scale and then convert it over into a numerical score before I entered it into the grading system.
Got it. Final question. You talked about some of the initial levels being too hard. What are some of the other big mistakes you made, and how can we avoid them?
I'm sorry, what was the first part of that question? I missed it.
You had initially talked about some of the levels of the game being too hard.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
What are some of the other big mistakes you made, and how can we avoid them?
Yeah, good question. So yeah, at the beginning, the levels I made weren't necessarily too hard, they just took too long. So the big takeaway was to have like the quick wins, you know, that it shouldn't take more than like 2 or 3 days to accomplish or to earn XP. So that was the biggest takeaway at the beginning. The other big takeaway was I didn't have enough team or cooperative missions at the beginning, and the class became very individualized, which is in a good way in some ways. But again, I think learning is a social event, and we don't want kids learning in isolation all the time. Frankly, most of the time we want them learning with each other cooperatively. So the other thing is if you gamify your class, make sure you have some team missions or team activities involved, and that they're cooperative games, even ones where maybe the multiple groups are working together to accomplish something together instead of competing against one another. Sometimes that works, especially for kids that aren't as much into the competing. That tends to help.
That's about all we have time for. John, final word.
I'm just, whenever I hear gamification explained, I'm just like, I want to go back and teach again, and this is what I want to do. So this is, yeah, I think this is totally, you know, exactly the kind of thing when we look at flipped learning that it provides, you know, it's the meta strategy that supports all other strategies, and this strategy, it just rocks.
Very good. Thank you, John, and thank you, Tom, for helping us understand the difference between gamifying a class and game-based learning. Thank you all for being with us today. In the coming weeks, of course, we're going to bring you more innovative thinkers from around the world who are demonstrating how flipped learning 3.0 works. Watch for the date of the next session at flglobal.org/webinars and mark your calendar. Reminding you that you can learn more about the other training opportunities for flipped learning by going to flglobal.org/training. And if you have not yet become certified, you might want to think about it over the summer. That's flglobal.org/get certified. As always, we thank you for the great work that you're doing in flipped learning around the world. We hope to connect with you again soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks.